everyone. Welcome to, I need a proper title. Drawing with, it's not a proper title. I need a proper title for these, but I appreciate it. What's that?
Drawn in with.
There you go. It's a better title than what I've got. That's for sure. This is a very, very exciting night for me. I think this is an exciting night for the channel, and I think it's going to be great for all of us. I came on just a little bit late, and I apologize for that. But we have been talking for a good half an hour before this started, and I completely lost track of time. It's so rare that I get to talk to someone that is not only, I'll go into that, so influential, but also so, I'm looking at the wrong camera. It's over here. So knowledgeable and have so much philosophy about what it means to be a comic artist and what it means to be an illustrator. And these are things that I don't think about enough. And I think we're going to learn a lot tonight, all of us. I'm very, very excited and very privileged to welcome Howard Chaykin, really one of the most influential comic artists and illustrators in the history of the medium. And this is a huge coup for the channel. So I'd like to welcome Howard.
Thank you, David. I have to leave now because I think this is the end of my career should come with that kind of introduction. I'm done. I've completed my mission. You know, as Alan Arkin said to me after I met him in a department store, in a grocery store rather, and told him how much I loved his work for all of his life, and he listened, and he turned to the woman he was with and said, "See, I feel pretty good about myself now. This is all I got. Thanks." You know?
Well, this
picture gives all of my secrets. Look at this.
We have an hour, so I want to jump right into it as quickly as possible. What's that?
I will reveal much.
All right, I'm excited. I'm switching my camera right now to my my board here. Let me get that set up, and once I've got that,
God, my nostrils are enormous, aren't they? Jesus Christ! Okay.
You look great.
Go on.
I think JDSCT is here. Barbarian Hulkster is here. You know what? Extreme Maybe is here. Papa Pills. Great to see everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. You know what? I can draw. It's funny, Howard. I can draw and talk at the same time. I can't set up my camera and talk at the same time. So I'm just going to quickly do this.
You need hands. You know, you got to do something.
It's a different part of the brain. I don't know what it is, but. All right, I think
I'm turning on my light box now, so just don't get excited. Nobody's having a stroke, okay? It's like sorcery. It's like magic.
Beautiful. All right, so for this stream, you guys are.
This is good.
What's that?
Key lighting. This is really nice. I really feel good.
Yeah, actually, yeah. We should have had that the whole time.
Perfect reference, man.
Yeah, it really is.
It's Wallywood art. Look, it's Wallace with lighting.
So the way that we always do these is Eric and I will be drawing our pictures and Howard will be drawing his. We're going to focus on Howard's camera the whole time, and we'll periodically show our cameras. But I think from here on out, just a little bit, we're going to show Howard working because that's really what we're all here to see. And also, before we get too far, I want to mention that Howard has a book coming very soon called Fargo, and there is a link to Fargo at the top of the chat, and we'll be putting it in the chat as we go along. Here is Russ. Thank you very much. Has it right here. So please go and click on that and check it out and support Howard with his new book Fargo, John Bentine's Fargo. I've seen some things from it, not only from Howard, but from some other artists too that are really pretty amazing. And hopefully, if we can get in just a little bit closer over your shoulder, Howard, just so we can see what you're drawing there.
How you doing there, Mike? Let's see. Should I be talking while I do this?
Yes, absolutely. And so what I'd like to do, and actually, truth be told, and oh wait, I don't know how you did that with the kit. All of us, okay, for a second there I could see it. For the most part, all I can see is just a white block.
Is that better?
That is better. Maybe even a little more. I don't know if that hurts it. It makes it hard to draw.
I've got a light box that works halfway.
Okay.
You're getting no image from the light, huh?
A little bit. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put us all in here while you're doing the light box, so we can all draw at once. And then once you've got a light box, we'll focus over.
What I'm doing right now is literally just free freestyling with shape. I think very geometrically. Drawing is for me something that derives from the geometry of the figure. My first and most profound influence as a comic book artist was Gil Kane. I no longer draw like Gil. I lack his hyperbolic effect, but his understanding of the fact that of the mechanics, the mechanical nature of the figure, remains with me. And I happen to be a huge fan of an illustrator named Robert Fawcett, who is profoundly geometric. In his book on the art of drawing, he talks at great length, disputing the idea that in drawing a leg inside a pair of pants, for example, you need to know what the leg looks like. He says his philosophy is that it's the pants that matter, and it's not the leg. And it's an interesting theory. It's an interesting possibility, and I've come to believe it's true. I tend to draw from my shoulders and my elbow, not my wrist, as I think you can see. And I work in large, broad strokes. And this is what I'm doing right now is on ledger bond and just basically setting up the proportions of the figure. Now you'll note, if you look here, the piece of paper I'm working on, the back has something on it. I recycle pages because I don't do complete pages anymore. I do my figures and my backgrounds on separate sheets and combine them in Photoshop. So I will have pages that are literally just nothing but layouts. So I will take those pages and chop them like guillotine and recycle them and use them for other pieces, for patches and pieces such as this. What I'm doing right now is a bookmark as part of the Fargo walk that we're doing on Zoo. And the thing about Fargo is in odd ways Conan, a bit of Jack Reacher,
Yeah.
A soldier of fortune. If Jack Reacher and Conan had a baby and he ran with Pike Bishop and Dutch or the Wild Bunch, you'd have a pretty good sense of who this guy is. And the novels are, my point that Mike Stratford is the guy who's ruining my life right now, is the guy who turned me on to the material. This stuff existed at the time when I was reading this sort of work, but I was totally unaware of it. It never showed up on my radar. And when I read them, I saw exactly what Mike saw. And there's a repetitious fetishistic nature to Fargo's relationship with his arsenal. The arsenal remains the same. It's 4 pieces. It's a Colt 38, which is a police revolver of that era. It's the first revolver made in the States that followed the Peacemaker, or the Western Peacemaker, the Colt. It's a flatter, more urban weapon that I believe, as I understand it, was a military weapon that replaced the Colt 45.
Huh.
And the second is a Winchester 30, which is simply a solid rifle of the era. And the third is a particularly expensive shotgun that was a gift to Fargo from Teddy Roosevelt. He was a friend of Roosevelt, and he served under Roosevelt in the Rough Riders. And right now I'm trying to figure out a way to incorporate the
so this story, you would say like 1910 or so?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's a 19th century man rampant in the 20th century.
Those are always my favorite cowboy stories.
I love that sort of crossover mix between sombreros and fedoras.
Yeah.
It's just swell. I love that period to bits.
So, I've got a question for you. Henry Jaremick mentioned that you worked on the heavy metal movie.
I did.
And
Indeed.
he mentioned you did storyboards. He was wondering if you did concept art as well.
I did. I designed all the characters from the Tarna sequence. And the only boarding I did, I storyboarded the last 10 minutes of the movie. and I designed the girl from the Harry Canyon piece that Juan Jimenez did. For some reason, Juan could not get what they wanted from him on that character, and so I designed all the fake Mobius stuff that was used in the Tarna sequence.
I didn't know that Juan Jimenez worked on that.
Yeah, he did the Harry Canyon stuff.
One of my favorites too. I've got all of his Meta Baron stuff.
A stand-up guy and a great guy.
I got to meet him really quickly, but it was at a convention. It was as much as I could, get while he had a lot of people there, but I did at least get to meet him.
With him one night, many years ago,
yeah.
In Italy, and he was a lot of fun to get high with. I'll tell you that. And I have a photograph floating of the two of us sitting clearly hungover in a town square in Lucca in 1982, when I was young and adorable at that point, and
almost 20 years before I ever went.
Like David, and so they, for some reason, he could not get what they wanted, and they got me incredibly cheap. They flew me out from New York City. They paid me, chicken shit wages. They set me up at the Sheraton Universal or Hilton Universal, whatever hotel was up there at the top of the Universal Studios. And when I saw what they were trying to get out of the locals, I understood why they flew me out, because there was a level of incompetence that was rampant in the work that was coming from the studio that was shocking to me. I was able to deliver. I was there for 6 days, and I was able to do my day's work by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I ended up having the rest of my time free. So I ended up doing some advertising work for the police. I had a friend of mine who was working in the art directing department at AM Records, and I did an album cover for a Johnny Cash, Charlie Daniels oratorio about Jesse James, and I did a couple of pieces for the police, not the cops, but the band.
Right. Wow.
And that was that was an absolute gas. I had a great time doing that, and so working for heavy metal. Can you see this now? Is this visible at all?
Yes.
Okay.
So let me.
So basically, that's about as much as I'm going to take out of the light box. Let me move this light box out of the way. So I'm going to turn this light on. Does that help at all?
It's kind of blowing out a little bit, unfortunately.
Okay.
That's
okay. All right. So working with those guys, I mean, heavy metal. Nobody really had any idea of how to do actual animated features that. When I saw Anastasia by Don Bluth, what I saw there was the potential for a kind of, there was an eroticism to the drawing that was not intentional in any way, part and parcel of the material. But I felt that somewhere, somehow, there was the potential of taking the kind of cartoons that Eric Sokol did, or Doug Snide did, Snide, for Playboy, and finding the animated franchise format for that. And heavy metal, the people who did heavy metal, just seemed to me to be limited by the sort of the kind of the nonsensical take on SF and science fiction, the contempt for SF and science fiction that was clear in the owners of the magazine.
Now you started out working with a lot of legends, with Gil Kane and Wally Wood and Neil Adams, but it seems like your influences are more from illustration, really outside of comics.
To a profound extent, that's true. When I was a kid, as I mentioned to you before we went on, I was inoculated by comic books at the age of 4. The same year that the Comics Code Authority infantilized comics and eliminated the potential of a more if not sophisticated, then transgressive audience.
Yeah.
And all I really wanted to do at that point in my life was superstar. I loved superstar. And so discovering comics at that age of 4, I knew that A, someone made these, and B, I wanted to be one of those people.
From the age of 4.
Well, I taught myself to read from comics. By the age of 5, I was reading on a 4th grade level because of comic books. And because I couldn't pronounce the words per se, but I could identify their context and meaning by dint of their relationship with the image.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents, who were fairly stupid, mistook me with some sort of genetic anomaly and didn't quite know what to make of me in that regard. They never understood how much comics had to do with how I became intellectually involved with reading. I mean, to this day, I remain.
Were they supportive of you being?
No. They had my mother died having no idea what I did for a living.
Dennis is watching.
Dennis is watching. Dennis is watching. We'll have to have a chat with him after the fact. No, I'm one of those guys who does this for a living, and does it alone. You know? I've always envied guys whose parents were very supportive of them.
Yeah, I had support. My mother was very, very supportive, and I don't think I could have done it otherwise. It takes, with support or without, and obviously it's much harder without, but it takes so much will to get yourself to the point where you can get your work at a level where it's going to be interesting to a publisher. It's a really, really tough ask because you're competing with artists like Dennis Cowan, who is here, and that is pretty amazing. I'm a very
Well,
very
you also
big...
have to take into account that I had no talent. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. I was motivated by hunger and blind rage, and it was that hunger and blind rage that ultimately got me to the point of actually learning how to do this work. And I understand, I don't regard comic books as an art. I regard them as a craft. And I say this with complete and total honesty. I don't think being a craft is in any way a diminishment of its value by any means. I think that comics are a form of, I mean, I've said more than once that comics are a frivolous and pointless medium that are difficult to do well.
Yeah, look, I agree and I don't at the same time, because I think that to be a really good comic artist, the range of skills that you need to have, because you can't reference everything, and there are some artists that do and do it beautifully, but for the most part, you have to be able to just draw anything right away at the drop of a hat, quickly and well. And it's a very, very difficult skill, and I don't see that other...
Well, that's what I said. I mean, it's frivolous and pointless, but difficult to do well.
Yes, it absolutely is. And it's always been, my favorite art form, obviously, like every comic artist. And before we started, you said that nobody gets into comics by accident. And I think that's true. You have to have a love of the medium. It's so much work to do well. I took your quote. I'm sorry.
There are a number of illustrators that I've known, guys of my father's generation, who all list, when push comes to shove, when press will admit that there's a comic book job or two in their early resume. And Neil Adams always told the story of meeting Bob Peake, who'd been an idol of his. And Peake had no real understanding of comics or interest, actually. And Neil always said that Peake would have made a great comic book artist, and he told him this. And Peake didn't know quite what to make of the remark. I mean, he felt, the Society of Illustrators is now extremely welcome to the comic book marketplace. The Museum of Comic Art is now at Society of Illustrators in New York. But that's a generational thing. That's a new idea.
I think it was maybe even something could be perceived as an insult back then, unfortunately.
Oh, yes. I mean, the Howard Muntz, who edited the posthumous publication of Robert Foster's book on the nude, was adamant in its contempt for comic art. An artist who I revere enormously, a cartoonist and illustrator, whose name I won't mention this. Well, yeah, he'll be dead by the time this runs. It's okay. My understanding is that Ed Sorel regards comic strip art as pointless and ridiculous.
My opinion is that I think in order to have that opinion of it, you have to have not tried it.
Oh, I don't know. I know he's tried it. I know he has. I mean, Ed Sorel is a pretty fabulous artist. I mean, Sorel knows his way around the page. But I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I was talking to. I think you and I actually might have had this same conversation. I was talking to somebody yesterday about the fact that one of the reasons why Ken Bruzenak, for example, is not regarded as the genius that he is that people see his work from me, they hire him, and then they get him to do conventional work. And the point being that I let Ken be Ken. And I recognize that in Ken's case, and in the best of all possible worlds, a letterer is not simply providing a venue for the delivery of text. That a letterer is a participant in the graphic experience. That balloons and captions and sound effects are three-dimensional elements that apply to the graphic experience of comics.
Absolutely. I have to say, I worked on Batman not long ago, and my editor at the time, oh shoot, you guys will watch this all the time. You know, I forget everybody's name.
Was it Larry Doyle?
Yes, Erick Doyle.
How helpful I can be.
Yeah, thank you. And so when I started, he asked me about lettering, and he said, "Do you have any ideas about an approach you'd like to take?" And the truth is, it never even crossed my mind to think about lettering. I never had, and the years of doing comics, I just never had thought about it. It really opened up a lot of just trying to think about it, and talking to him about it. I learned, I think, a lot. So Henry Jeremick had a really good question. He wanted to hear a list of what you would consider to be your strongest influences.
In terms of comics, it would be I'll start with comics and I'll go to illustration. Johnny Craig, Alex Toth, Wallace Wood, John Severin. In my earliest days, it was always Gil Kane, but I outgrew that hyperbole very early on. I also look at the work of Vittorio Giardino with dismay. I mean, capable of even getting close. The work of Ferdinand Tacconi, who is just an extraordinary talent. Harvey Kurtzman. Outside of comics, it's Robert Fawcett, Harry Beckhoff, Herbert House, Albert Dorn, Al Parker, Stephen Dohanos, an artist that I reviled as a child until I understood that he was a guy who painted very tightly, but was also an absolutely breathtakingly good graphic designer. His storytelling, his picture making, it's intimidating. It's brilliant. And I mean, if you look around my office, you can't look around my office, these are on camera. But on that wall over there, I have a Robert Fawcett original called The Art Director, which is a classic. It's a K-Scene piece.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the wall behind me is a piece by an artist named Don Daly, who died very young. He should have had a bigger footprint than he did. That's for the Dorothy Bennett chess book. I own a number of those pieces. And over my computer table is the first piece of illustration I ever bought, which is a pencil drawing by Dean Cornwell in pencil in graphite and Conti crayon for the history of transportation mural at number 8 Rockefeller Plaza.
Wow.
So, and the house is filled with this stuff. I mean, I've got the original poster, the original artwork for the poster for the Outsiders by David Grove in my guest room.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm well taken care of. Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't have. I've got as much of an extension collection as extensive collection as I can. I'm a little limited by what my wife will let me get. So
Wow.
I know. What can I say?
You're saying she's very strict?
She's very strict. That's true. But if she wasn't, we would be living in a box, and I'd have a lot of nice art.
I know the feeling well.
So in terms of design,
Yes.
what you brought to design, just in terms of breaking panel borders and cascading panels, and frankly, design elements that I can visually appreciate, but I don't understand. When did that really start for you?
I was driven out of comics by a public argument, a fight that I had with the editor-in-chief at Marvel Comics, and it was over a change that had been made on a painting of mine without my being asked to make the change. I take it back. I was asked. I refused to make it. And when the change was made, not on an acetate, but on the actual artwork, which is kind of a shitty thing to do. Mm-hmm. And it led to an explosive argument. And I left comics for about 2 years. And in that time, I learned a number of things. First and foremost, a respect for technique, which I had never had before. I had always been, frankly, lazy and inept. And getting by on the Woody Lohman line, getting by on a smile and a shoe shine. We were talking earlier before we cameras again about being engaging and being liked. Mm-hmm. And I got away with a lot without being liked. And ultimately, while I was away from comics, I became an illustrator working on paperback. And my style, what I brought graphically to the work, was inappropriate for selling to mass market paperbacks. I mean, that cover that I mentioned, the Don Daly piece, it's over my fireplace.
Yeah.
There was a legendary art director named Gene Light at Warner Books, who hired these guys to do different weird stuff. He hired a guy named Roy Anderson, who did a lot of work with National Geographic, to do a series of covers for the re-releases of the Max Brand Westerns, and they were just absolutely brilliant. There were these perfect posters in this 3x4 space, and they sank like a stone. And as Gene said to me, the Western audiences want brown paintings. And while I was away, I was trying to figure. I managed to get a gig doing sort of graphic designy stuff in support of a more mainstream painters. And it piqued my interest, and I began to start studying what I was looking at, and began to understand that a lot of the work that I'd grown to love, I began to dissect it and analyze it. And this was all happening as I was trying to climb out of the financial hole that I'd fallen into working for Byron Price. No one made any money working for Byron Price except for Byron Price. And ultimately, what happened was, First Comics made me this offer on American Flag. To this day, I have never gotten a satisfactory answer from anyone at first as to what it was that inspired them into any confidence in me that I could justify the amount of money they were offering me. It was enough money for me to climb out of the financial hole that I'd fallen into, thanks to working for Byron Price. And what ultimately I had to do was, it was like, Fisher cut bait. I had to learn the skill set to justify that investment. And I know this sounds very odd coming from comic book people, because comic book people tend to, I think, their detriment, seem to believe they're behaving like rebels and winning the game by acting as if they are not professionals in an amateur business. And the problem is that we come to comics after being hobbyists. Yep. Our work starts as a hobby, and we have to unlearn that hobbyism quickly and fully, so that we don't become victims of that fake outlaw trope, or of being abused and mistreated and exploited on a one-sided exploitation by the corporations for whom we work.
Absolutely. Well, they're there to make money, and if you are not careful, a lot of them will absolutely do it at your expense. And I think I've been really lucky. I worked for Mark Silvestri first. He's an artist first and foremost, and he was great. I worked for Marvel. That were, I feel like I've been so sheltered over the years, and I've been very, very fortunate. But I've certainly heard stories of how bad it can be.
Well, I did I'm doing a seminar, a day-long experience in tandem with Mark Wade in November, and we're going to be. I'm doing something called a paradigm, which is it's an extension of a lecture I did at Marvel. And when I was in the early aughts, for about 5 or 6 years, twice a year, I would do a seminar at Marvel, and much of that seminar, the first day of that seminar, was about time management, career management.
Mm-hmm.
That idea that the most perfect relationship between talent and client is one of mutually satisfying shared exploitation. That I am being exploited by you, but in turn, I am in turn exploiting you and achieving my goals through that exploitation. And that's a really, really difficult prospect and concept for many people to understand, who've been led to believe that their job is to be a victim and complain about it. And I find that disconcerting, because frankly, I gave away much of my farm before I was smart enough to realize that I shouldn't. And ultimately, I've come to understand that I was smart enough to know better, but I was stupid enough to think that I would be okay with it. And ultimately, I had to get okay with it. When I hear comics will break your heart, or comics broke me, what I hear is the underlying sense of narcissism that supports that says, what's not said there is that it happens to everybody else, but it can't happen to me because I'm better than that. But you're not. The problem is, comics is in the corporate sense, an entertainment enterprise. You're a cog in the giant wheel. If you choose not to be, do something else. But don't simply assume that because you want something, you're entitled to get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to diminish somebody's experience when they're going through hard time paying the bills and they're not getting paid. And it can be a tough business. At the same time, it's an entertainment business, and it can be a career. You can make it a career, but you have to forge that career yourself. And it comes down to the work. You do the work. You do it as on time as you can possibly do it, and you get to a point where hopefully you build an audience that appreciates what you do, and then you deserve to complain. I probably shouldn't have said that.
Years ago, there was a TV movie called Thank You, Comrades, about a penniless Italian nobleman who became the agent of the Soviet film industry in London in the early 1920s, and he embezzled every penny from them, and managed to escape and live a life of fabulous wealth on Soviet money. And the franchise of the show was Time Plus Money Equals Profit. Mm-hmm. And that's become a byword in our office. That your job, that despite what Harlan Ellison said, your job is supposed to be brilliant and delivered on Tuesday.
And there has to be a balance there.
And it can be tough. It can be tough.
So, original Drink and Draw Social Club. I think that's Dan Panosian, right? He said
Dan and Dave.
Yeah, he said, Howard, that you promised him the David Grove art.
No, Miss Chiarello gets it. Chiarello has dibs. My wife knows that if I predecease her, that goes to him in the will. Who said that? Panosian?
It's from the original Drink and Draw Social.
Yeah, no, that's cheap. No, Chiarello gets that piece. I'd love to know. I would love to be drawn by Al Hirschfeld, sitting on a cloud like George Bernard Shaw in My Fair Lady poster, watching Panosian, Johnson, and Chiarello fighting over it with sacks full of dog shit. That would be fabulous. I live to serve. Yeah, that would be fun, right? You know.
Yes.
At least it was, but drawn by Hirschfeld, right? You know.
Oh, it is Dan who's posting from it.
Dan is lying. He's lying.
Well, it's
By the
great
way,
to have Dan
Dan-
here.
Dan has never been up to my house to see the piece. Chiarello has, as has Johnson.
That's great. We were lucky enough to have Dan here 6 months ago.
What a talent! Oh my
Whole
god!
lot of fun.
Remember
it
when
was
you
great.
think?
All right, so quickly, I'm going to go ahead and show how Eric and I are coming along here.
I'm
Here's
going
mine.
to show this to Mike.
Now, I have to admit, I can draw most guns. I don't think I can draw a sawed-off shotgun, as you can see. I probably need a reference. So,
Does that make your heart sing?
It does.
Okay.
As does Dave's.
and here is Eric's right here.
Let's see.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's looking great. Very nice. So yeah, Eric, you're moving along. We're I'm certainly falling behind here.
All right. Now, Eric, from an art director's perspective, from an historical perspective, you put him in a Stetson.
Okay.
Okay. And Fargo wears a campaign hat, which is basically a Smokey Bear.
You know what it is?
And
Okay,
you know what it is? And I'll tell you right now, it's a pain in the ass to draw.
it's a Mountie hat.
What?
It's a Mountie hat.
It is. Yes. Yes.
I think,
Canadian. So to me, it's a Mountie hat.
I think the
Well,
Bren is.
that's a Smokey the Bear. What can I tell you?
I think the Bren-
A sort of shotgun is very easy to draw. Okay. What you've got is two tubes and a wooden frame, and you've taken the stock off. What's left is the grip,
Right.
and two hammers.
And see, it's the grip where I really lost it.
Mm-hmm.
My grip is way too. I drew it like a pistol that turns into a shot.
It's pistol-like. It's more like it resembles an 18th century pistol.
Yeah.
You know, like that Wolf would have used on the Plains of Abraham. How's that for a Canadian reference for you? Yeah.
So I'm hoping mine has, it has the charm of obviously being drawn without reference. That's what I'm going to tell myself.
I'm still going off on the Plains. I'm delighted that I was able to make a Wolf at the Plains of Abraham reference. Come on.
I also want to mention quickly again that you can find Howard's campaign for his new book, Fargo. And let's see, here we go. It's Fargo Hell on Wheels. We've got a link in the top of the description, and we're periodically.
There it is.
There it is. And Russ is putting it in the comments. So if you want to see a whole lot more of what Fargo is about and a lot more of the artwork and some teasers for the story, check that link out. Give Howard your support. It's some beautiful looking stuff with not only Howard's art, but also a long list of incredibly talented creators. I don't know. That's beautiful. It's amazing to see.
That would be cruel in the human punishment. This will be inked tomorrow.
All right.
But that at this point is ready for me to ink. I do not do a pencil that is basically an ink line in pencil.
Yeah,
I was really freed up in that way when I saw the first time I saw Jordi Burnett's pencils or Esteban Maroto's pencils. Their pencils are freehand and freestyle and fill space. And for me, it's all about it's getting the geometry right. Those illustrators that I mentioned, one of the things that I find fascinating about all those guys is their pencil drawings all look exactly alike. Harry Beckhoff's pencils, although they're the size of baseball cards, his pencil technique is the same as Robert Fawcett's, as Dean Cornwell's. They all look alike. And,
they would have learned kind of in the same institutions, I'm sure.
Yes, they were all Art Students League people.
Yeah,
it really came out of that same idea.
Looking at that picture too, I wanted to just say the thumbnail for this, if you guys saw the thumbnail when you clicked on it to come in here, I picked a piece from American Flag that there are so many really groundbreaking pieces from that period and from Howard's whole career. But I picked that piece because to me, I have drawn similar kinds of things and I've seen from all of my favorite artists. And we were talking about this earlier. My artist influences are all comic artists entirely. And it is what it is, Howard. They're all comic artists. So I've seen that copied, that style of layout so many times. Generations of artists have copied that, and generations after me now too. And it's just not the kind of thing that was ever done before. There's so many examples of that. I picked that one because it just really stood out for me as some of my earliest comic work that I saw was Mark Silvestri's X-Men, and it really reminds me of some of the layouts he did for X-Men, and Jim Lee on his X-Men run, very heavily influenced by that kind of graphic sort of imagery with a full figure, really put together in a designy way, but also still very natural, and it's a tough combination.
Well, I mean, as I said, I'm a huge fan of geometry and organization of space, and one of the ways I finally realized that I could actually make a living in comics was by incorporating some of the principles that I was learning from Fawcett's teachings, because Fawcett was one of the 12 famous artists, and the famous artist school books are, if you don't have them, I cannot recommend highly enough going on eBay as soon as we're done here and see if you can find a set that's at a reasonable price. And a reasonable price is a subjective idea. But they were designed for illustrators in the early 1950s, and the sort of illustration that was being done then is very much what's called upon of us as comic book artists now. I cannot recommend those books highly enough. They're a vital source, and I have a 1954 set, a 1962 set, and as well as the unpublished abortive first attempts for Robert Fawcett, John Whitcomb, Al Parker, Fred Ludekins, and Austin Briggs. And this material is imperative. It really is. And the way you make a living in comics is to figure out a way. What Kniff always said, Kniff's ambition when he started doing Terry and the Pirates was to create a strip that he was able to do illustration quality images 7 days a week, which when I was a kid and I read that, I didn't understand what it meant, because I identified illustration as a sort of work that Alex Raymond did, not Milton Kniff. Kniff felt something else. There was something, Kniff looked simple compared to Raymond. The older I got, the more I understood that Kniff was a far superior talent, that he was both a great writer and a great cartoonist. And the synergy that exists between the words, the text, and image are what makes that strip just monumental. And so much of what goes on in that strip is the sort of stuff that's being trained on in those famous artist books. I cannot recommend it highly enough.
Well, yeah, definitely. Everybody check it out, and I'm going to too. And I know way too little about it myself. So,
well, that Facebook page I recommended you join will be a revelation to you. I mean, the guys you should be looking at, knowing your work. I mean, the guys you want to be taking a look. You know, the work of Victor Ambrose.
I want to say yes because I'm going to be embarrassed to say no.
That's great. I'm having more laughs here than I expected. Victor Ambrose is an English illustrator who died a couple of years ago, who's done books on costume design. The books are just extraordinary. Look him up, Ambrus. You should be looking at Harry Beckhoff's work, at Herbert Paus's work. And if you look into comics, take a look at the covers that Reed Crandall did for Black Hawk and Military during the Second World War. They will blow you away. Crandall, but by the time Crandall became again publicly aware in the 60s, thanks to Archie Goodman bringing him out of retirement and putting him to work in Creepy, he developed this very, very methodical, linear etching style. But in the 1940s, he was a rich brush guy, and his pages were just extraordinarily designed, and his covers were graphic designed to an extraordinary excellence. They were really swell. Have a look. I mean, he Reed Crandall's work on Black Hawk and Military, Harvey Kurtzman's work on the war books at EC, and Dave Johnson's work on everything that he's ever done in his entire life. My three favorite comic book cover artists. Dave knows this, so I'm not flattering him. He's heard this before.
I see Prador7 says Aaron Lopresti loves Reed Crandall. Aaron Lopresti is a great comic artist.
He is.
Great recommendation.
But Crandall's work is nonpareil. When I finally got the Picto-Fiction collection of the romance books that they published that never really saw print, seeing Crandall do his take on 1950s women's magazine illustration in comics form was another revelation. He was a really interesting thinker, an artist who was unfortunately left behind very little footprint in terms of awareness of modern talent, worthy of a second look. Just there are guys out there that are primed to be reevaluated and re-recognized. I mean, I'm waiting for someone to put together a collection of Alex Kotsky's Apartment 3G, a newspaper from the 50s and early 60s that is just breathtaking.
Now, I personally think that there's not anywhere near enough literature about that whole period in illustration. Illustration, I think, now, I don't think I'm alone in saying this. It was at a time when fine art was had an absolute, well, it's still a real bottom, I think. And there's really nothing interesting being done. I think there was a lot of criticism to, I don't know, look, none of it was for me. At the time, though, and Bob Peake, Phil Owenthead's there maybe a little bit later. That's why I'm a little more familiar.
Well,
but
Peake's career starts in 1954.
So it's early enough.
Yeah, no, he was around doing magazine. I mean, I own two Robert Peake pieces. Both of them are, one is an advertising art from 1958. The other is a piece of editorial illustration from 57 from Cosmopolitan. And that's my favorite period of his stuff. But he worked so long and so steadily, and he had such a track record that, we tend to associate him with the 60s and 70s. But his work was, his first major movie poster job was for West Side Story. Mm-hmm. And that's in 62. And from that point on, he won. I mean, the way they bought posters in those days was they'd hire a half a dozen artists to do the posters, and one of them would get chosen to do it. And the last job I ever saw when people did that regularly was on Apocalypse Now. I was in Chicago for the Chicago convention, which in those days was in the city proper. And I went to a place called the Jack O'Grady Galleries, which is an illustration gallery on Michigan Avenue, which run by a guy named Jack O'Grady, who represented a lot of those East Coast guys from Midwestern clients. Back then, advertising was not a cross-country business. There was regional advertising. Mm-hmm. And O'Grady had a stack of stuff of his clients that had been done for Apocalypse Now. There were like 20 different versions of the different pieces of Peake's take for the Apocalypse Now poster. There were Fred Ottner's pieces. There was just a whole bunch of other people. And there was a revelation to me. And these they were like 15 by 20. And in many cases tighter than what had been published as a finish. So the opportunity to work out your issues, you were financially remunerated, and just it was a phenomenal experience. Those days are of course long gone now.
They are. Was there ever a time when you thought maybe you just want to leave comics and just go into illustration?
I did, and I wasn't good enough. I really wasn't. I didn't have the skill sets. Comics, because the kind of comics that I do don't require, they're labored, but they don't require labor. They don't require, before we went on, we were talking about cutting Twisket and airbrushing. I don't have the patience to invest that much time in a single piece. I've learned when a comic book page is done, it's done, and I move on to the next one. I come out of it, my first job as an artist was doing paste ups and mechanicals for a company that produced composite headshots for modeling agencies in New York City. So I learned all the fundamentals of using, rubber cement, X-Acto knives, press type, all that stuff. And to a profound extent, that production skill set informed a lot of what American Flag looked and felt like, as it also did Black Kiss and Times Square and The Shadow and Black Hawk. And with the advent of Photoshop, to a certain extent, the Photoshop stuff has replaced that X-Acto knife and rubber cement. So there's always been a production and design element running underneath the work, and that's I think the template, the linchpin of the career. I think it's why I've been able to have a 50 some odd year career at this. Even before I could draw well enough to get by, I could at least make a page that had some sort of narrative value, or that had some understanding of subjective beauty. And since my belief is that comic book artists, as I said earlier, are graphic designers in the service of narrative, that for me, the job of me as a comic book artist is to make a page that is endowed with narrative value, endowed with images individually of narrative value that in and of themselves are microcosms of the page, and that in turn is beautiful, whatever beautiful may be. There's balance, not symmetry, but balance, and structure, and that's really what it's about. I'll turn this up so you can take a look. It's tilting at the bottom; it just keeps falling off the desk. So my drawing table is filthy. It is a well-used drawing table.
Mine is actually worse.
Oh no,
I'm not. And it's so similar, actually. We have but I have a big piece of white paper that I just trade out all the time, so I can give the illusion.
I have a row of push pins up here to put my Fairburn system. This is the Fairburn system is over here. You see these colored books here?
Yeah.
Those are the Fairburn system. Every man of my generation owns a collection of the Fairburn system. They were a series of books published in England in the mid-1970s. And they were unfortunately never updated. So all the guys none of the guys under the age of 40 had ears, all the hairs over their ears. And what they are is British character actors of that era. If you go through the books, you can find, every character that you've seen done in comic books by guys who came of age in the 70s and 80s. So it's men, women, headshots, body shots, and kids. And it's used all the time. And then you go a little bit to the other direction, up here, and you can see the fact that I always have my shock suspense and my crime suspense. Shock suspense, also known in my house as Liberal Hysteria comics by Wallace Wood, and crime suspense are the Johnny Craig stuff. I learned how to draw suits from looking at Johnny Craig stuff at ECA. So, and let's see what else I can show you that's around here.
Sounds great.
There's some tear sheet books of there's Bob Peak, there's McGinnis, and there's my World War II stuff, my gun stuff. And
those books, you put those together from like
yes,
scrap.
I have 30,000 tear sheets, which I'm leaving to the Society of Illustrators when I go.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, just tons of stuff. And if you look up here, let's see, can we get up there? That's right up there is the reference for the dress on the cover I did for Fargo.
Oh yeah,
not faking anything, including the hair. I take very seriously the idea that people look different at different times
and talk different. Even 20 years ago, I watch a movie from the 80s, and women have not just women, really, it's everyone, but there's a different accent even then, much less the 60s, 50s.
The affect changes. I mean, when I was a kid, I realized. I mean, I was when I was 13 years old, I was bar mitzvah. The day after, I discovered Edgar Rice Burroughs on the 25th of October, 1963, and it changed my life. It was the second transformative soul on the road to Damascus experience that affected me the way I make a living. And the next day I was bar mitzvah, and I was sick as a dog and had no idea. My mother was convinced me that I had hives, that I was having a nervous reaction to the experience. What I had was rubella. I had German measles. I infected 30 people. I spent in bed, and that week, the local Metro Media affiliate was showing, they had the Warner Brothers movie catalog. And they showed that week all of the gangster comedies. After the 1930s gangster films of, Little Caesar, Public Enemy, Dr. X, they used the same characters, the actors, the same sets, to do comedies about gangsters. Brother Orchid, A Slight Case of Murder, All Through the Night, City for Conquest. And one of the things I came to understand, I'm watching these movies, is that everybody in the movies who was supposed to be stupid sounded like me. So I taught myself not to sound like that. And so I developed this mid-Atlantic accent. Mm-hmm. And when I did go to school, I went to school in Chicago to be a radio broadcaster and got out of that really fast. But I have a completely American accent. Everybody knows I'm from New York City because I speak quickly and I'm succinct. And I come down really hard on consonants, which is a New York thing, which people don't really think about. New Yorkers don't slur. There's no slur in New Yorking. And
clipped, yeah.
Exactly. And so when you talk about that different accents, it's absolutely true. There's no longer any real thing as a regional accent. I can still pick up when people come from Philadelphia or Baltimore. I live in Southern California, and Californians don't think they have accents, and they don't understand that at all. They do.
They do.
But I can identify a Baltimore. I mean, when I watched The Wire, I knew which of those guys actually came from Baltimore. Because as good as those English actors were at doing their doing American accents, they weren't doing Baltimore accents. Whereas on Mayor of Easttown, Kate Winslet, what is it? Kate, what's his name from Mayor of Easttown? Who's also in Titanic. Kate Winslet. She did a Pennsylvania accent that was absolutely right on the money. And
she's a pro, you know. She's always been very. Yeah. I think she's won an Oscar, hasn't she?
Yeah, but so is Dominic West, and he should have done a better Baltimore accent. Yeah. But
yeah, you know, everybody has weaknesses. So I wanted to ask. So many artists have been so heavily influenced by what you do. Are there artists that you think you could really point to that you'd say, you know, I feel like some of what they picked up is really something you really approve of and that you appreciate the influence on their work?
I really don't know. I don't have a real commercial footprint. I don't really care about what the audience cares about. I'm very dismissive and disdainful. I recently pointed out there was a very popular alternate indie cartoonist who, the one time I've met him, treated me with such condescension and contempt I couldn't believe it. And I remembered that's how I treat most people, so it's okay. So I don't really think about that, and I don't really believe that. I mean, what I did with Flag and what I did with Times Square was introduce a different way of thinking graphically about narrative. And the audience didn't notice it, but the talent pool did. The guys who ultimately became professionals. So there's an organic relationship to the material that does not directly point at me, and that occasionally creates like a weird sense of a frisson of bitterness. But generally speaking, I don't do the sort of stuff that other people want to do. I don't do hyperbolic material. I was recently approached by a guy. A working comic guy. He's a veteran. He's not old.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but at the same time, what do you mean by hyperbolic material?
Most superhero comic books are pretty hyperbolic. You know, they're operatic in their sensibilities. The emotions are enhanced. Everything is very high. Batman just walks around with his teeth gritted. He's got something up his ass. He's really intense, and the world of Jack Cole's Plastic Man and Thrills, Spills, and Laughs is long gone. That sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Keith Giffen, who died last week, and for whatever his work may have meant to other people, at least didn't take the work seriously. I also don't think he took seriously enough to actually do anything more than a first draft laugh. But at least he was goofy about it, and I like and goofy is occasionally the best you can hope for. I find most modern comic books are, narcissistic, self-mythologizing, and hyperbolic in their assumptions of divinity and just superness and the struggle and with great power comes great response. No. It's just there's a fun void there, and I prefer not to operate in that world. I loved Edgar Rice Burroughs as a child. I loved Superman and Batman and Captain Marvel and all the Fantastic Four stuff, but I have absolutely no desire whatsoever to return to it as a world of actually making a living at, because I'm not that good at doing that, and I don't have the conviction to support that goodness. I tend to do work that is more relaxed, if you will. It's the difference between arena rock and early bop. It's Miles Davis circa 1980, 1949. That kind of stuff.
We are truly polar opposites. In terms of, like for me, and I know that comics take themselves very seriously. I'm fully aware, but I love it. And I really like comics that just really embrace that unironically. And I know that's not for everyone.
I don't like meta comics. I don't like comics that know their comics.
Yeah.
I like the idea of creating a page that in which the way it's visually structured is part of the narrative. But the over, I mean, I posted a list a couple of days ago on Facebook of Western movies that I really love. Okay.
Mhm.
And I made it a point specifically that conspicuously absent were the Italian pictures and Clint Eastwood stuff. I'm not a fan of the Clint Eastwood pictures. I find them phony baloney, because I find them, a lot of, self-gratified narcissism. It just doesn't interest me.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not a naive or otherwise, but I also recognize that the difference between my characters and the average superhero character is that my heroes operate from the perspective of grace under pressure, and that grace under pressure is something that has vanished from the cultural landscape. There's this assumption that the hero must be in pain, must be wounded. I back in the mid '80s, when they didn't know what to do with Superman, they asked me and Frank Miller and Alan Moore to pitch a Superman concept. And the Superman concept I pitched, I knew full well was never going to happen, but I had such a good time pitching it that I just couldn't stop myself. And the pitch basically was, you want to hear it?
Yes.
Okay. The pitch was, you open a Metropolis as alarm clocks are going off. It's a Monday morning, and 12 panel pages, a series of 12 panel pages of people awakening, rising, doing their stuff. And among these people, we see Clark Kent, and just a series of just people getting up and getting to work, and moving around, everything else, and the city is waking up. And my Metropolis is Chicago, not New York, because I always thought that was the big city that Siegel and Schuster knew really well. It was not New York, it was Chicago. And as people are moving around and commuting and writing and all this other stuff, all of a sudden there's a sonic boom, and everybody on the street looks up as the sound of Frank Lesser, the song "You've Got the Cool, Clear Eyes of a Seeker of Wisdom and Truth."
We got the singing.
What's that? I told
There we
you.
go.
And they look up, and then there's a double page spread, and there's Superman flying over the skyscrapers of Metropolis, wearing a Walkman, singing along with the original soundtrack of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. He lands in the Daily Planet, sneaks in, goes into a storage room, and changes into his Clark Kent outfit. And as the story progresses, we come to understand that everybody in Metropolis knows that Clark Kent is Superman. But they're not going to let him know because they don't want to hurt his feelings.
It's great. I could see that would be a tough sell.
Oh, yeah. Let's just say that the look I got from Jeanette Kahn and Paul Levitz was non-plusive, if you will. But I was young. I was 31, maybe 32. Full of piss and vinegar.
Yeah, I've seen a take actually much more recent from Neil Gaiman with Batman, where they're kind of similar themes, and people loved it. So I think we have an older, more sophisticated audience than what we
I think they're older. I don't think they're any more sophisticated. I'm sorry.
Well, a lot of them are more sophisticated. I can't even say the word. So there you go. That's where I'm coming from.
They may be sophists, but they're not particularly sophisticated.
Fair enough.
I think they're victims of their own arrested adolescents.
I was talking to somebody, a creator I really respect, and this is where
spell his name. They won't be able to figure it out. Who? No.
It was Robert Kirkman.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying anything bad, so I'm happy to say it. And he said so many artists do what they do because they never grew up, and I definitely feel that way about my approach and probably the way I live my life a lot of times too. I kind of never grew up, and the disadvantage to that is I have too much reverence for what's there to ever really be truly innovative. It's not where I'm coming from. It's not ever something that I've thought to myself, I really want to try something different. I wanted to do what all my favorite comic artists have done. That's really always been my goal, and I'm happy, very happy, doing the kind of work that I do. I wouldn't change it, but I'm so glad that there are creators that are willing to look outside and say, you know what, there are things that are interesting about it, and there are things that maybe deserve, I don't want to say mockery. We all love the medium, but I think you have to have a certain level of detachment to be willing to just take the chance to do something so innovative and different. And
I agree. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I loved comic books from the minute I saw them. I can still bring up the sense memory, the smell of that paper. But by the time I became a working professional, I learned a couple of things, which are A, that I wasn't good enough to be getting the work that I was getting, despite the fact that I was getting that work. And B, as my skill set improved, the better I got, the less interested I was in putting that skill set at the service of what was being asked to be addressed. That I wanted to find other things to do with the work that I did. And I was lucky enough to have the nerve, the gall, and the wherewithal to follow through on that. And that's what that.
Yeah, and really, it's a set a place in history and change the.
You're much kinder. You're much kinder than I deserve, David.
This is so not true, because, and I think all you guys watching, this, that
I go on.
There is during the late 80s, there's a really revolutionary period in comics, just in the way that the comics were done, and it didn't start then. It started earlier, and so many artists like Todd McFarlane, very, very heavily influenced, and this is where they got it, and it just could not have happened. It's an era that I think really led to the mainstreaming of comics, and maybe much to your chagrin, because it's.
I mean, the fact is, I look at the way that a lot of the tropes and techniques that I introduced are used, and I'm kind of appalled at the misrepresentation of the technique, because to a profound extent, the work that I did was all about space as representation of time, and the application of Western storytelling, and using the structure of a joke to define the narrative structure of a thing. And it requires a kind of graphic discipline that doesn't exist in the general population of the prison we call comics. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've been here a lot more than an hour, David. And I think it's
you're right.
For old people like me to consider moving on.
We've run you over. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, I've had a great time. I didn't embarrass myself. It was a really good thing. I didn't get food on myself because there was already food on me, but I'm off camera, so you can't see it. I've managed to conceal the fact of how fat I've become from you, which is always a really good thing. And I managed to have, and we've had a great chat. It's been really great talking to you. That's no shit. I'm good. So, I just to remind you, who's some of the.
There's a comment from Prager 7. I've only just recently discovered Chaykin's The Shadow. Whoops. Hit the. Come on here. The Shadow and American Flag, they're amazing and better than most current stuff, in my honest opinion.
I think all current stuff, but I'm okay with most.
Well, thank you very, very much for coming on.
Oh, no, David, this has been a treat. I'd love to do it again. This would be a pisser.
And before I say goodbye, I want to just mention once again that you can find Howard's book, Flag. We have a link at the top of the description.
Fargo, Hell on Wheels.
What did I just say?
You didn't say Fargo, but don't worry about it. It's okay. Again, Jack Kirby.
I'm you know what? An hour in, I'm losing my head. Fargo, I'm so sorry. Hell on Wheels. I think I almost forgot to mention the book at the end, and I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit there. But there it is. You can click on the link, give it a look. It's some beautiful artwork by Howard and also some other guest artists, some really amazing stuff. You can find out a lot more about the story, and you can support Howard by signing up here. So yeah, give it a look. And I want to thank you again, Howard, for coming on. This has been really incredibly interesting. I have, and I don't want to go out also without just mentioning, Howard mentioned to me there's a Facebook group called Today's Inspiration.
Yes.
Um,
Go if you're on Facebook, do what you can to get a hold of Leif Peng's Today's Inspiration. It is a treasure trove about the kind of illustration that we're talking about here. If you're not familiar with this world, it will blow your mind. If you are, it will deepen your understanding and deepen your love. I promise you.
all right. Yeah. So
Dave,
yeah,
send me, we'll connect by email. I will send
Okay.
you a list of guides you should be looking at, or I suggest you look at. Okay.
all right. And unfortunately, I'm not usually quite so out of my depth when it comes to the conversation. So my drawing is a lot less far along than I planned on it being. So I'm going to have to finish this one tonight.
Well, as I say, I'm going to, this will be, I'll be inking the drawing that I penciled here first thing in the morning. But
all right, yeah, I'll be doing mine tonight. So
I can never go from pencil to ink in one sitting. I have to put it aside.
I tend to do most of my work with ink. I'm so lazy when it comes to penciling. So
Well, I'll ink this spontaneously, then I'll erase it and I'll go into it with a blue pencil, bring back the stuff that's been lost and redo.
Yeah.
And then basically, when I'm in Italy next week, and what I'm going to be doing there is a demonstration of how messy and disgusting and dirty my work can get. And I don't mean technically. I mean technically, as opposed to in terms of passion. So there you go.
and I'm looking at mine, and my eyes are too close together. I'm going to fix that tonight. But all right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, David. Have a great evening and stay warm. I'm assuming you're in the part of the continent beginning to get a little chilly now, right?
Yeah, we're getting a little cold. We're getting some cold rain. It's not fun.
Not here. No, we're still Californiaing. Thank you. Be
That's
well.
more.
Love to
All right.
all. Be
Thank
well.
you. Good night, everybody.
Thanks so
Bye.
much. Good night.